It's wonderful to have such a good crowd turning out both in person and online. This is wonderful and delightful. Before we begin, I just want to say welcome to Fairleigh Dickinson University. We're very proud to host Poets Corner, especially to distinguished poets we have with us tonight. But every week it's delightful to have, or every month it's delightful to have everyone come, as well as all of our open micers who share often some really wonderful work. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and also acknowledge that a land acknowledgement is not in itself action, but might be at least a step towards truth. In the interest of time, I'm going to turn over the floor to Jan Zwicky, truly a name to be conjured with in Canadian poetry. We are so pleased you're with us tonight.
Thanks immensely, James. Thanks to all of you for coming. Many thanks to Poets Corner for the invitation and to Canada Council for its support. I'm going to read, I'll read from some earlier work and some new work, and then I'll read from my most recent book, co-authored with photographer Robert Moody, Courage. And now you know that it won't turn out as it should. That what you did was not enough. That ignorance, old evil, is enforced and willed and loved. That it is used to manufacture madness. That it is the aphrodisiac of power and the crutch of lassitude. You, an ordinary heart, just functional, who knows that no one's chosen by the gods. The aspens and the blue-eyed grass have voices of their own. What will you do now that you sense the path unraveling beneath you? Sky, unraveling the sea that still sees everywhere and looks at everything. Not long. What will you do, you heart, who know the gods don't flee, that they can only be denied, who guess their vengeance? It has been a long hill, heart. But now the view is good. Or don't you still believe the one sin is refusal, and refusal to keep seeking when refused? Come, step closer to the edge then. You must look, heart. You must look. Far from Rome, a poem written in January 2021, when the ex-president of the United States was disputing the election, executing people and things like that. On the ferry just at dusk, heading west into the winter sunset, colorless, the light behind the clouds, which stood above the hills, great twists of clay, opaque, their edges flaring as a lamp came on, and then another on the shore. I was alone in staring out the windows. The other few foot passengers, masked, solitary, bent above their tiny screens. Again, there was no warning. A shock of sadness rose up through me, pain like insight, but unshaped, pure force. It pulled the stale air and the roar of engines, after it, the starving birds, the lice-lipped fish, bodies emerging from the permafrost, jaguars living feet burnt to the bone, the Klieg lights on at Terre Haute, and the mob, the lie-stoked mob, chanting its devotion, baying for revenge. All of it, all of us, roiled in that grief, sucked through the vacuum of its wake. And later, in the small hours at my bedroom window, woken by the faint boom of more fighter jets some 30 miles off, heading up the coast, I do not recognize the gauze that drifts across the black salal, the leafless alders. Once it was called moonlight, foreign now, incomprehensible. It fills the air and falls upon the earth. Late Spring, a poem for the memory of Patrick Lane. Too cold for weeks and now too hot. The temperature anomalies so great, they're measured in multiple standard deviations from the mean. Hummingbirds arriving with the light and clustered at the feeder because the salmon berries aren't in bloom. Bees too, tumbling in the isolated crocuses, 3 or 4 at once, moss, dusty, crunching underfoot. And yet, those bees, exquisite in their dozy, awkward concentration, each hair as though new washed, and the polish on their black legs. The hummingbird aloft, its sci-fi swoop and hover, red flame at its throat. Well, my friend, that last phone call out of the blue, the startling energy in his voice, the gathering vision, what we knew, he knew, the beauty of that knowledge. Goodbye. Goodbye. Learning to die. My father in my dream trying to teach me. We're joking and talking. Such good times, even better than of old. How relaxed he is, how happy we're together. And I think perhaps I start to understand the joy of the dark night, my dead father laughing, a bell somewhere steady through snow, and time slowing. Or is it my heart at last hearing its name? And now I am running to meet it. I am running. My mother's dream. She says it's come the last few days since she's been home from hospital. It's woken her each morning, and sometimes when she dozes in the afternoon. You know, I never dream all my life, not once. And now, a building that she calls a shack she doesn't recognize up on the north side of the West Field. It's almost empty, just a table and 2 chairs. 2, she says again, 2 chairs. Who are they for, I ask, although I know, having had this dream myself. One is mine, she says, and the other? Pause, then calmly, with a kind of wonder, I don't know. Another pause. It's strange, you know I never dream. That shack, 2 chairs. I can see the old spruce boards, the warp on them, their slate gray sheen, the west light and the east light, open to the weather, neither window pane nor door. A good dream, I tell her, knowing this will be the image I'll remember when all the others have dissolved. the shack that isn't and yet is more real than any house we've lived in, the morning that is also evening, the evening that's a kind of dawn, and those two chairs, adjacent, turned towards each other, radiant with emptiness, replete with it, so empty that they're full. Now I'll read 3 poems from a chapbook recently published by Deer Mountain Pages. What do women want? When I realized that I'd been infected, that I'd come to harbor not just one, but 2 desires, that I wanted what men want, an echo of my thinking in the halls men build, as well as wanting it to steer me true. Then I was sorrow struck. A blunt bit fouled my tongue and I fell silent, every opening inside me closed to joy. My body knew before I did. It took me out, unseeing down the rough road to the beach, into the water, then cold salt, the stones slick, slippery beneath its feet. That's what I did to it. Sent it to drown what choked me, sent it to be drowned. In that place there, what I knew, fire is no metaphor, water no metaphor. They were my rage, my grief, and I was lightless earth. What pulled me, shuddering, into the air again? I do not know and do not like to ask. Some failure of conviction or the image of my mother's face. Now every day some other raft of portraits from those halls is hauled away and burnt. I should be glad, but they're working on the marble with a wrecking ball and do not seem to notice the palaces of cinder block that rise up in their wake. The bad connections on their cell phones, the hard shine on their righteousness, and the girls, their half-bare breasts, their inexplicable anxiety. This poem is in the voice of a woman in Homer's Iliad who has no voice. She's a sex slave. She belongs to one of the chief warriors, Achilles, and when the chiefest of the chief warriors, Agamemnon, has to send one of his sex slaves back in order to get rid of a plague that is assaulting his people, he demands to have the sex slave of Achilles. Her name is Briseis, and this is a poem in her voice. I was wrecked, of course. No soul could take it. Fucked and fucked and fucked. But I saw the others too. The men they'd caught but didn't kill, the cattle and the dogs. That's what you have to understand. No thing is a thing. It takes so little pain to learn this, unless perhaps your pain's so huge you become a thing in order to avoid it. I've seen them cry, the ones who aren't yet slaves themselves, with other men at their own need for love. Even when they have it, they convince themselves they don't. Is that what things are? Ones that love can't visit? Ones who think their dads will see them crucified before the gates will open? Glory, glory, glory. And this poem also is in the voice of a woman from the Iliad. At the end of book 1, Zeus's wife Hera has caught him out in a betrayal, and he's absolutely furious. They're at a banquet of all the gods, and he just says he's going to destroy them all if she doesn't shut up. They'd all gone silent, Zeus still muttering and shifting in his chair. Poseidon grunted, flung his arm out as though to speak, then sank his eyes into his beard. Hephaestus stood and walked towards me, steadily, without his staff, both hands on that drinking cup. Think, mother, he said. We can't win. There's no real choice. It's surrender or annihilation. He spoke so everyone could hear, but held my gaze. And it was then I understood, for yes, why not? Why not annihilation? I know he meant to comfort me, telling it again, reminding me I too had almost died and both of us survived, but something in me tore past any skill of his to mend. What had been good in me, what had been kind, the part that hopes for justice, it gave way. I felt it there, behind my lungs, collapsing like a stream bank overfull with rain. And I became the thing they say I am, a match for the god, his sister, graceless, mean, a sack of shapeless hatred lodged against his sack of lust. I'll conclude with a suite of poems from this book. Is recently out from Freehand, 67 Ontological Studies. That polysyllabic name, ontological, is a word that philosophers use, whose root is the Greek word for being. So these are attempts to pay attention to the world. We've had all sorts of grief, we're all depressed, yes, but the thing to do is to pay attention to what's here, what's now. That's in fact why we're where we are. We stopped doing that. So although we're over the cliff, it's time to live rightly, and that's to look at things. Robert Moody, the photographer, and I didn't try to photograph or write to the other's work. Each of us produced our contributions independently, and then we put the book together. We thought, oh yes, that goes here, or yes, that goes there. So I hope to give you a taste of how this has worked. They're very short. Armchair. Do you remember, my friend, the doorway we had to widen for your bulk, and that pole lamp with the broken brass ferrule, the nights we three saw dawn together? Guardian of lost paperclips and half-glimpsed visions, you who were old and warm and strong, you who embraced me like the earth, while my mind went alight among the houses of the dead. Moon. Moon, there you are again, solo in the pale blue sky. I agree it's strange, the way I stare. The snow on the mountains is as white, their dark rock as remote. I too said goodbye to the earth long ago. But you see, I touch it still with my hands, my feet, my eyes. Beached seal, dying. It could be I shouldn't wait with you. When I'm dying, I might want to be alone, without distraction, work to do, unhooking and unbraiding, loosening the seams. I'll be glad if it's like this, though, under open sky, near dusk, the bow wave of the distant ferry, motionless. A gull tipped sideways for a second in the wind. Effervescence. The wine opens its arms and its soul streams upwards, breaking back into the air. The long throat of being, its liquid body, and the soul. Is it breath or light? Sparkling, we say, the radiance of dissolution bursting on our lips. Old books. The world is once again a desert, but head out anyway, among the banded cliffs, the untalkative sands. There's a place, you know, a seep, the water sweet, miraculously cool. No more than a trickle, and the tin cup pocked and battered. But it has never, down all the centuries, run dry. String quartet. What was it that you heard half a century ago, transfixed there at the top of the stairs, the evening pink above suburban rooftops, the radio left playing by the homework on your desk? How did you know, you who knew nothing of Europe or deafness or love, that someone finally was telling the truth? Translation. Struggling with the lexicon, the grammar crib, straining towards sense, suddenly, across 20 centuries, out of unimaginable foreignness, some other mind leaps up to meet your own, as though your heart and his were eyes, and above the smoke, the hordes, the shouting, those eyes locked. View from the ferry. Last car on the upper deck. So as we pull into dock, I'm standing aft in the open air. The ferry stalls, slow as the sun this time of year. 3 p.m. already, dusk gnaws at the edges of the shadows. We drift toward rush hour, eyes front. And there, behind a tangle of guy ropes, pilings, warning signs, a mixed flock of 50, maybe more, buffleheads, scoters, mergansers, dipping, swiveling. It rides the swell as one mind, weightless in the gusting light. 2 last poems. Waking. Sleep. I'll let you out, that's good. Thanks. Waking. Sleep, what pulls us from you? You who walk the dark cellular corridors of the body in your dusk blue robes. Old and 20,000 times I've woken, but can't remember how it's done. Some border crossed, but borderless. Some turning, but the path to it erased. Each day you've stood at the end of the final hallway, the rim of the world gone white. The hook of sunlight lifts us, gasping to a new transparency, and we twist with our sudden weight, the spangled brilliance of it, the sluice of dreams, prismatic, flashing as it drops away. Rocky shore. sharp sun and a big northwest wind, the world a breathless rumpus underneath, gulls up, wheeling high against the light tide, running fast out in the strait. Earth with its arms wide open, uncountable its loves. Even you, even me.